Facebook page.
Okay.
Okay.
I want to break it down just a little bit. I'm going to take y'all to Vietnam today. But on the way there, we're going to go to basic training and flight school. And before I take you to Vietnam, I'm going to ask for any questions you have about flight school. And I'm going to take a couple of questions and then get us off to Vietnam.
All right. Let me introduce you. All right. Well, thank you all for being here today. We got a good crowd and these fine guests. I'm Brad Warthen, and welcome to the Noon Debrief. We're here to listen to Dennis DuPuis tell about his experiences in Vietnam, where he served two tours as a helicopter pilot. The first starting when he was just 19 years old. That's why he calls his program From High School to Flight School. Dennis is one of several men in his family, some of whom are here, who proudly served their country in wartime, in the Second World War, Korea, and Vietnam. He also continued to serve many years after his return in the South Carolina National Guard. And as you all just saw, we have some other guests here today, a crew from C-SPAN, which thought one of our programs might be worth broadcasting nationally. So, hello to America from the Relic Room. This is an accredited museum that honors the long military tradition of our state from the Revolution to the present. A recent major addition to the museum is the exhibit, A War with No Front Lines, South Carolina and the Vietnam War, 1965 to 1973. In keeping with that theme, we have lately presented a number of live programs such as this, in which Vietnam veterans join us to tell their stories. Please welcome our speaker, Dennis DuPuis.
Thank you, Brad. I'm proud to be here today and thank them for giving me this opportunity. I want to thank everybody that came, especially the Vietnam veterans. Welcome home, guys. For family members that served at home while we were away, thank you for what you did, and to all the citizens that are here, thank you for coming. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about what inspired me to be a helicopter pilot, how I went to flight school, and then my tour in Vietnam, particularly the first tour. My inspiration was my father, seen here on the left picture on the far right, Master Sergeant at age 24. And this picture was taken the day that Colonel Westmoreland became a general and went to the NCO club to celebrate with the men. The picture on the right is some cousins that I'm very proud of, my dad was too, who flew P-40s during World War II. They had three brothers that flew. Al Atkinson flew in the Navy and survived the war. His youngest brother, Robert Edward, went MIA flying a P-40 in China, but he crashed in Burma. And Peter W., who was a test pilot for General Chenault in the original AVGs, who died in a test flight in October of '41, about 6 weeks before Pearl Harbor. Dad used to talk about his Atkinson cousins who flew in World War II, and he was so proud of them. I could see it in his eyes when he read me the book about the Flying Tigers, and I wanted my dad to be that proud of me someday. So, along with Dad's relatives, he was born on an Indian reservation. It goes back to a fellow named Najimini, who means, he's in the history books as no heart, but it literally translates to no heart of fear. And Revolutionary War, Lieutenant Colonel Richard Campbell, who fought at the Second Battle of Camden at Hobkirk Hill, Battle of 96 in 1781, and died at Utah Springs in October of 1781, and was buried on the field. So military ethos and warrior ethics goes way back in my family. Another inspiration was my brother Bruce, who's here today. And I'm very proud of all of them. And so that's what I wanted to do, was make my dad proud of me. So we went to basic training at Fort Polk, Louisiana, with a lot of other helicopter pilots, and then ended up in Fort Walters, Texas for primary flight school for 4 or 5 months. We I flew these things, it's called a Mattel Messerschmitt TH-55. That was made by Hughes Aircraft. And there had to be thousands of them in the air down there. We were training so many helicopter pilots in 1968, especially after TED 68, that it was just amazing. All my instructors were warrant officers, and they brought me through primary, taught me how to hover, taught me how to fly traffic patterns, taught me how to navigate, taught me how to land in confined areas. And after 5 months at Fort Walters, we moved to Hunter Army Airfield. Went through, to get there, we went through Dallas. And on the right there, you can see a picture from the Bell helicopter plant. While the Army was training thousands of helicopter pilots, they were making many, many helicopters right there in Fort Worth. Now, Mineral Wells, when we got there, there were main heliports, which are, I've annotated with a yellow triangle. There's 2 of them on there. And that's where you originally flew out of. And then they went to stage fields, and I got little blue arrows marking those, just some of them. There's many, many stage fields, and that's where we learned to hover and do traffic patterns. Just a little note of interest, Fort Walters, Texas is where Audie Murphy took basic training, so I guess that's why they sent the helicopter pilots there. I went to Savannah to finish advanced helicopter, and that was 4 months worth of training. We started out in OH-58s, or excuse me, OH-13s, which were like the Bell helicopter on MASH. And we learned to fly instruments and that with 50 hours, and then we moved to the magnificent Huey helicopter with a jet engine and all these instruments. And it was the one we were going to fly in Vietnam. So I graduated. When I graduated on June the 30th, 1969, in the right there, you'll see my brother on the left after he returned from Vietnam. He'd been back probably 3 months. And there's my dad, who had been back from Vietnam about 1 year and 4 months, and brand new warrant officer, Dennis DuPuis, on the right, 19 years old. On the right over here, I have my brother Bruce and his wife Annie. Bruce was wounded 2 times in Vietnam and recovered in country, and met Annie, who was a nurse at the 71st VAC hospital. They dated, they came back to the world, and they got married. And Annie loved my brother so much, I think she might have shot him the second time just so she could take care of him. Now Bruce laughs, but Annie didn't think that was a damn bit funny. So I graduated, took 30 days leave, and went home to Vietnam. So I'm gonna stop here for a minute and ask for questions and clear up just a couple of questions, if anybody has any, about helicopter flight school. Anybody?
Yes, sir. Was it hard to get into flight school?
Oh no, not hard at all. When I went down to talk to the recruiter, I told my dad I was going to want to go to helicopter flight school, and he'd been in the Army 29 years or so, and he told me, he said, "Son, be careful." He said, "You're going to go down and see the recruiter, and he's going to see your mechanical ability, and he's going to want to sign you up to go to mechanics crew chief school, so that you get experience around the helicopters, so that you'll be a better pilot when you go to flight school." He said, "Don't believe that." He says, "Stick to it. Tell him you want to go to flight school." And sure enough, when I went, that's what the guy asked me. "I think you ought to be a mechanic first." And no, I want to go to flight school. So if you passed the test with a score of a good score, and were physically able to pass the flight physical, you were accepted in flight school. Now, when we got to flight school, my class started with over 300 warrant officer candidates and probably 120 commissioned officers. We graduated about 180 warrant officers. And overflow went to Savannah because Fort Rucker didn't have the airspace for this increased load and need for helicopter pilots. They didn't have the airspace, they didn't have the helicopters, they didn't have the maintenance schedule. And so the overflow went to Hunter Air Force Base, and we took 60 warrant officer candidates to Hunter, and I think about 60 commissioned officers, and took 4 months there. But it all depends what you applied for. We had some guys that were prior service that were sergeants that applied to go to flight school, and they were accepted. When I got to Fort Walters, I found out there was quite a few mechanics that had been to Vietnam, and now they're going to go back as helicopter pilots. So Dad gave me some real good advice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, Lim. I flew with this guy for a long time in the National Guard, and I want to tell him that nothing's going to ruin any of my war stories like the truth. So I expect you to just hold on there. All right, let's go to Vietnam. Beginning of August 1969, I got on an airplane in Augusta, Georgia, after a night of celebration, and went to Atlanta, changed airplanes to go to California with a stop in Dallas. Well, I went to sleep on the airplane after we left Atlanta, and they landed in Dallas, and the stewardess woke me up and says, we're in Texas. And I'm going to California. And I went back to sleep. Well, we got to California, and I went down to pick up my duffel bag, and I waited for the baggage to come through, and there was not many duffel bags, and I thought there was more than that, and I never did find my duffel bag. So I went to the baggage claim. I says, hey, where's my bag? And he says, let me see your ticket. And he looked at the ticket and he says, your bag's probably in San Francisco. You're in Los Angeles. I'm supposed to change your plane to Dallas, but I didn't make that. So ended up going to Oakland. When we got to Oakland, one of the guys in my flight class was Jim Willingham, and his father, he lived right outside of California. And Jim, Mr. Willingham, worked for Caterpillar, and he'd given everybody a business card, told us when we got there to call him. So after I checked in, I called him up. He told me to meet him at a bar. Went down there. There was 3 or 4 guys from my flight class there, and Mr. Willingham showed up. He took us to his house, where there was 12 or 15 more guys in my class that had been there for maybe 2 or 3 days, or 1 day, or got there that morning. And he was letting them stay at the house until they got the port call. And so we had like a mini reunion there at Mr. Willingham's house, and told us when we got to Vietnam to let him know where it was, and we all wrote him letters when we got to our unit. And about once a month, if you wrote him a letter, he made a newsletter, and his secretary at work put it together and mailed it to all of us. It was a wonderful, wonderful thing that Mr. Willingham from California did for us. And I'm thankful for that. There's some good stories about Vietnam, and we just need to tell them that. So I arrived in Vietnam in Bien Hoa. We landed, they cut the airplane off and opened up the door, and hot, humid, tropical heat came in there, and the stench of a third world country with open sewers and everything just invaded the airplane, and it was not a pleasant experience. And then we had a group of MPs come on board and briefed us on the ride from Bien Hoa to Long Binh and how dangerous it was going to be, and walk steadily and get on the bus. And we did that, and the bus had grenade screens on it, and went through downtown, and there was Vietnamese on motorcycles and bicycles and walking along, and we just thought every one of them was VC and they were all going to throw a grenade at us, but that didn't happen. It was just, we were just scared. A couple days at the replacement depot, got assigned to the 1st Aviation Brigade, went to group headquarters in Can Tho, and then went to the 13th Battalion, the Delta Battalion, Combat Aviation Battalion in Sac Trang, and then ended up going to Vinh Long, where I was in the 114th Knights of the Air. And that was from August 69 to October. One of the things we did in the assault helicopter company was make combat assaults. We loaded up with troops in one place and carried them to where they were going to engage in a battle. They'd fight there, and when it came time to pick up, we'd go back and get them in a pickup zone and take them back to their home base. Usually in the 114th, that was a flight of 3 with some gun cover that covered us in and out. And I started there, got a few hours, and started doing night missions. Started flying on about the 16th of August. My birthday was the 20th of August. I turned 20 years old. And by the end of August, the first night of September, we went to a place called Muc Qua, where we were standing by for 3 ship lifts. Night missions were, we didn't have night vision goggles. It was just naked eyes, and we flew formation and the guns followed us. We had a command and control helicopter that was going to guide us into wherever the ground commander wanted. So we went out from Muc Qua, we went a little bit west to a place called BTT and landed in a special forces camp. And when the guys came out there, they weren't the same guys that we picked up during the daytime. The Vietnamese we picked up in the daytime had starched uniforms and brightly colored patches and shined boots. And these guys that came out to the aircraft were in camouflage, wrinkled up camouflage, and they're actually mercenaries that worked with special forces on the border. And we loaded them up in 3 aircraft, took off, went back east towards Mukwa. We saw the flare ship dropping 3 flares at a time to light the way to the LZ, and poof, 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 and they drift down a little bit. So we turned final and headed for the LZ, and I was in a trail ship, being the new guy, on the map so I could learn the area. And I told Mr. Wilson, who was the aircraft commander, who'd been there probably 6 months, I says, we're getting close to the border. And he says, being a new guy and not really knowing me, he says, are you sure? I said, yeah, well, I'm pretty sure. Let me check the map again. So we're constantly heading towards the border, and we get closer and closer and closer. It's a surveyed line in the plain of reeds, just a grass line, kind of like down around Buford, where you go out to the park and it's just tidal basin. It was like that. No geographic marker, no road, no canal, anything like that at the border. So we approached into the buffer zone, and then we approached into the no-fly zone. I told him, I'm sure we're headed towards Cambodia. And when he made that call to lead, of course, questioned the new guy's navigational skills. Could you hand me that water, please? Like I'm going to have time to open it up and drink it. Thank you. And where were we? We were on the way to Cambodia. So it's nighttime. We're flying to 3 in a V, and we're flying off the right side. We start descending, starting our approach. And the approach is over a wooded area into an open, grassy area. And at about 100 feet, we fly over this tree line headed towards the clear grassy area. And an automatic weapon opens up and shooting green tracers directly into the lead helicopter. I'm looking at the lead helicopter. I'm close to the controls in case my aircraft commander gets hit, that I'll be able to take over. And I'm focused on him because we're flying formation, and he's just being hit with these green tracers. I haven't been in country 3 weeks yet. First time I ever seen this. And all of a sudden they hit the engine, and the engine puked out hot parts like it was a bottle rocket out the backside, and he started to descend quicker. Well, his engine had quit. And then there was a fire back there, and it hit the ground so hard that it bent the skids, and we're trying to match his rate, and it starts to be on fire. And we land and touch the back of the skids, and the guys are jumping off, and we start to take off, and his flames are higher and bigger and brighter, and there's no way in hell that anybody could have survived that. And so the 2 guys, 2 other aircraft, take off to the north, further in Cambodia. And as we leave the light, nighttime, at the light of that burning ship, we are swallowed up by the darkness, and it feels then like we're a little bit safer. And we keep kind of low and increase our speed so we can climb higher and get away from these guys, and we head back towards Mukwa. Land there and want to know what's going on. The command and control ship is calling Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. American helicopter down 10 miles north of Mukwa and on guard, an emergency frequency that we monitor. And we hear the Air Force respond. And they're going to send a Spooky or a Puff or fixed-wing aircraft that has a lot of firepower over there to provide cover. And when the Cobras come back and they rearm and they go back out, and finally the CNC comes in to get more fuel, we're briefed on that all our guys somehow or another made it out of that aircraft. But 2 Americans were wounded, and they've got them with them, and they're evading to the east. There was a piece of Cambodia that came down in like a wing, and we landed inside the wing, and they were going to the east. And we were just told to stand by. We wanted to go help get our guys, but they had coordinated with the medevac because the advisor, Lieutenant Michael Burns, had been injured, and about sunup, we recovered him, and the medevac come in and dropped the crew off, and the mission was over. The newspaper article on the side over there is from the Stars and Stripes, and it describes from the Stars and Stripes a couple of weeks later how an Army aircraft just happened to be on the Vietnam side of the border and got shot and made an emergency auto rotation a mile into Cambodia, which meant he had to be a mile high, and there's no way in hell you had that kind of glide distance. And that 2 other aircraft had gone in there to rescue the thing. a few facts right, but for the most part, that entire article is bogus. But that's published in the Stars and Stripes. So that's September. October rolls around, and I get transferred because there was quite a few guys on that flight that were upset with the command. I get transferred to Bearcat, to the 335th Assault Helicopter. And our call signs, the slicks were Cowboys and the guns were the Falcons. And I was in Bearcat from October 69 to October 70. There it is. Here's a map. You can see up on the top left, that's Saigon, Benoit, Long Binh. And down here where the red arrow is Bearcat Base Camp near Longtime Airport. In World War II, the Japanese flew airplanes out of Longtime. That's how long it'd been there. Our normal area of operations, our AO, was about an hour and 30-minute flight to the southwest. And we did that every day. If we had a report time of 8 o'clock, that meant we had to leave Bearcat at 6 o'clock in the morning. Get up at 4 o'clock. So that's a kind of a picture of what Bearcat looked like. Originally, it was one of the 9th Infantry Division bases. The 9th Infantry left about a month before I got there. And again, this is a little map of where Bearcat was. So with the Cowboys, I flew slicks, but this picture here has me in a gunship. At the end of the tour, the slick guys got to ride in a gunship for a day, and the guns got to ride in a slick a day. They didn't want to do a combat assault, but we had some single ship missions that we call swing ships, where we would support the province, the special forces of that province. And we'd make like a milk run. We'd start at the headquarters with the operations sergeant, and he told us where to go. And we'd go around to the different fire bases that was in his province and deliver the mail for the day, or bring a new guy to the outpost, or pick up one that needed to come back into the headquarters. So we made that run in the morning, had lunch at the province headquarters, and they had a lot better food than the mess hall did. And they were able to buy food locally, fresh vegetables and meats and stuff like that. So that was always a special treat. And it was a long day. It was usually about 10 hours. The afternoon, we'd make the same run. So in December of 69, we have a single ship mission, December the 7th, where we go out and do this. In the middle of it, there's a call for they needed a patient taken to the hospital, and we drop off everybody that was on board at Dongtam, and we go over to pick this guy up. We thought it was a routine patient pickup. Well, we went to land in this very small special forces camp with antennas and everything all over the place, and we start taking fire. And we can see where there's a guy on a stretcher laying right outside a bunker. Well, as we attempted to land on top of the large command bunker, we started taking a lot of fire, so we decided to leave and try again. Well, we didn't communicate that to the crew chief, and the crew chief had jumped out on the top of the bunker to go get the guy. And when we left him on the ground. And we went up to altitude, and we called for some gunship support from a nearby airfield, that maybe there was some guns in traffic, and a couple of Crusaders, Cobras answered the call. And they came out, and when we got ready to make the approach in there, Robert Luke was over by the stretcher on the ground, and we went in and landed a little bit different place. The Cobras shot at the people that were shooting us and suppressed that fire. And Robert Luke picked this guy up and threw him over his shoulder and ran to the helicopter, threw him in and jumped in. We didn't know that initially when he jumped out, he'd knocked himself unconscious. Well, that day, Robert Luke gets a Silver Star. That's December the 7th. January, I am promoted with more responsibility, become an aircraft commander, to where I can participate as a commander of a ship to do combat assaults. Down here at the bottom, you see I was sitting on the ground on standby, and when we got another mission during the day, the guns would come by and call up the lead ship, and the lead ship would throw smoke out, and we'd all crank up and we'd go do the extra mission. In January, I've been aircraft commander about 3 weeks, and there's an fire base that's overrun. This is all Vietnamese with a couple American advisors. And that day, we're awarded some medals for going in and picking these guys up. And we find out that day that the Vietnamese, when we went to a place where they'd been overrun, we didn't get their wounded first like we do the Americans. When you pick up a wounded American and you tell them, you know, if we can get you to the hospital within an hour, it's a golden hour and chances are you'll survive, it helps motivate the rest of the guys. Well, with the Vietnamese, if you bring their dead in so their family can bury them and they go to their happy life hereafter, that provided the same kind of motivation to the Vietnamese soldiers that getting the wounded for Americans. We didn't understand that because we evacuated dead after dead after dead when this outpost was overrun, and some of the wounded that were there the first 2 trips probably died in the meanwhile. We did not understand that. That was the middle of January. February the 4th rolls around. We got a day mission, and the guns launch early, and they go out and meet with the ground commander, and there's a lot of VC activity, and they start engaging them, and the flight shows up and picks up first load of troops, and we start carrying troops into LZs all day long. It goes into the night. It was supposed to be the last mission, and it was about 1 o'clock in the morning. We had 16 hours of flight time during that day. We left at 6 o'clock in the morning. Here it was 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. So the flight is inbound to an LZ, and the ground commander changes his mind, doesn't want them there. So we make a go around, and we have to reposition and line up on another LZ. Well, in the process of taking off and turning around and getting lined up for another one, the guns get a little bit confused about where they were, and they knew that the new LZ, Jerry Henley, Falcon 86, knew that the heaviest fire was going to come from the right side and he was on the left side. So he called his wingman and told him change positions. Jerry went over the, not directly above the flight, but went back behind him to slide over the right side, and 80 was going to go under the flight and come up on the left side. Well, in the process of doing that, nighttime, with no night vision goggles, it was all plain, we probably made a turn tighter and in a descent than what 80 thought it was. And I'm flying Chalk 2 off a lead, we're staggered right, and I've got a good sight picture. You got to be close enough to where the lights on top of the helicopter illuminate some details so you know how far away you are. And we're about 75 feet away, about 3 rotor discs. And all of a sudden, there's a B model on its side between me and lead. I thought I was seeing things. We've been flying, so it was there, and it disappeared. I couldn't believe it. You know, I thought I was imagining things. And then over the radio I hear, Mayday, 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 80, it's going down. Well, we expect the trail ship was the one that was supposed to pick anybody up the trail and fly to 10. And we expected Mr. Williams, who was the administration officer and was out getting a couple hours for his flight pay, we put him in the back so he wouldn't run into anybody. Well, that didn't quite work, and he wasn't paying attention. He did see 80's lights, and I looked out over to my right, still in this turn, and I could see aircraft lights going away from us and going down. And the next call was even louder and more assertive. 80's going down. And I looked over and I could see him, and I started to pull out. And then he got some very loud and very aggressive, and damn it, 80's going down. And I called him, I said, Cowboys 2-1's got you. And I had him inside. I was about a quarter mile behind him, and I followed him to the ground. He crashed, rolled over on his side. I landed probably 30 seconds later. The crew got out and went to help get the guys out of the helicopter, came back to mine, and the whole time I was sitting there with a landing light on that crashed helicopter. It was just like a tunnel of light, and the aircraft was on its side. And I was concentrating, I guess, so hard. I didn't hear any noises. I didn't hear anything on the radio. I was just concentrating on what I could see. And then pretty soon here comes my crew chief and gunner, and the crew, and they're coming back to the ship, and they get them on board, and we take off, and the remaining gunship, Jerry Henley, follows us out until we get to safe altitude, and we take them to the hospital. Jerry turns around and goes back to the scene of the crash where they're landing the rest of the helicopters, and the bad guys had already overrun the crashed helicopter. So we got them out just in time. So we go to Bentui, which is next to Canto, drop them off at the hospital, get some gas, go back to the area working on, and all of a sudden, where we couldn't get anybody to come help us, you know, the previous day and up into the night, all of a sudden there's all kinds of aircraft there. And the colonel from Canto, the group commander's there, and there's other airplanes stacked up every 500 feet. And I called into Cowboy Charlie, and I told him, we're off, we're back en route to the AO. And he says, RTB, Bearcat. That means return to Bearcat, return to base. And we got a clear shot all the way back. So we get back, and we land, the sun's just coming up, and hover into the revetment, let it cool down for 2 minutes, shut the aircraft off, and as the aircraft rotor slows down, I'm starting to relax. My heartbeat slows down. And when it finally stops, I get out, unstrap, take my armor protection off, climb out, and the crew chief is tying down the blade, and he says, Dennis, come here. I want to ask you something. Where he's tying down the blade, on the bottom of the blade, there's a yellow scrape, just the width of a tail rotor. And it could have only come from one place. We'd had him midair. Usually not survivable. But his tail rotor in that high bank left turn had contacted our rotor blade. And we actually took his tail rotor out. And that's what caused him to crash. So the mess hall had brought food out to us, which was rare because we usually didn't work for 24 hours. And I sat down on the bare aluminum floor of the helicopter with my legs dangling overside and started to eat breakfast with the crew. There we were, we'd been in combat, we'd survived, and we were quite simply alive. Now, life and death ain't simple, but we were quite simply alive. I felt like a little boy sitting in a big chair with my feet there. So we bonded. So that was February. Into March 31st, and I gotta read you this. We had the aircraft crash, and we were on a lift out of Bentray to a 10 ship lift. And when we first got there, we got another field had been overrun, and we went and did the mass medevac for that, and then went back to Bentray and rearmed and refueled, and started our next mission, which was a flight of 10, and we were taking them into an LZ. Or no, excuse me, we're going to PZ to pick them up. So I was the last ship, I was trail, and it was going to be my responsibility to pick up anybody that went down. So first trip into the PZ pickup zone was you had perimeter security. The ground guys set up and protected the PZ pickup zone. And as we picked them up, they would come to the center of the PZ and we'd pick them up. So the last lift, the guys that were in the security perimeter would have to get on the helicopter. And that's when the other guys would occupy the perimeter that they had established and wait for us to pick them up. So the last flight out of the PZ was the one that you expected the most fire from. And we did, and before we took off, the lead was hit with an RPG, rolled over on its side, and crashed and burned. I wrote this poem about this poem. It was the last flight out of that PZ on March 31st, 1970. The last lift out usually meant trouble, but our Falcon gunships would give us cover. Flight of 10 slicks landed to the east. I was trail. My eyes alert, but my mind was on the mail. Our Falcons flew above us like a giant wheel, and you just don't know how safe that made me feel. So when we were loaded with the troops, the lead began to rise to a 3-foot hover, which was no surprise. They made a right pedal turn to view the flight, make sure everybody was picked up and it was clean. And there was a flash of light. Boom! An RPG impacted with a blinding light. Well, lead crashed and burnt in what looked like a slow motion roll. Get out of that PZ was the rest of the flight's goal. A black mushroom cloud climbed above bright orange flames. On the way out, I'll check for survivors. They'd have done the same. The AKs cracked, bullets splashed here and there, and the Falcon gunships rolled in hot. It was no time to be scared. So I flew forward where 8 other slicks had just been, and our door gunners fired into the tree line again and again. At the burning wreckage, I did a flare so I could see, clear the flames out, so I could see 2 dead pilots where they should be. But there were 2 empty seats where the pilots should be. "Hey, there's one of our guys," came a very loud shout. I landed the aircraft and the gunner jumped out. The crew chief and the co-pilot jumped out to help another guy, and just like that, alone in the aircraft was I. I watched my brothers carry 2 back to our ship, but with 2 still missing, how could we quit? We found 2 survivors from a crew of 4, AKs still shooting at us. We could linger no more. Our door guns chattered, our rockets impacted on the left. Then on the radio I called out, "I'm coming out to the west." You know, I looked, but I didn't see any more Americans in that PZ. "Come in, Charlie, Charlie. Miller and Leonard are alive, but we don't know about if the others survived." That time I turned around and looked, and Miller's burnt face had started to peel, but not one crew member in my was wounded. Ain't that surreal? Kevin Crabtree had been thrust out of that orange fiery ball, but not Kimball Sheldon. He's one name on the wall. March 31st. The very next day, instead of being trailed, I was the lead helicopter. And we'd gone to an LZ. We picked up, again, worked out of Ventray. Picked up, it was a bright, clear day. Flew out to where the Falcons were prepping the LZ, and we started inbound, called 3 minutes, and they started to come out to pick us up. And the Charlie said, "Hey, we got more guys in the LZ," so they turned around and went back. We orbited. We went inbound for a second time. Same thing happened. They had to call the Falcons back. There was more guys in the LZ. Third trip, we went all the way in. We landed and staggered right. On the way in, the tree line opened up. We could see the muzzle flashes, and we could feel the impacts in the aircraft. And out of the corner of my eye, Larry Goldsmith, who was about 26 years old, was going to be the next aircraft commander. He was ready to be one. I saw his arm fly up like this, and he goes, "I'm hit." We were committed to land. I hadn't got on the ground yet. There was guys in the back getting hit, some of them Vietnamese infantry. And then Larry calls again. He says, "I'm hit. Damn it, I'm hit over here." He got hit 3 times on the way in. On the way out, he was hit 3 more times. There were shot groups, small, in the windshield, all on that side. He survived. He went back to States, and he died at Agent Orange in 2012. That was my co-pilot. That was PZ and LZ. That was the next day, April. So May rolls around. The end of April rolls around. It's the last day in April. And we get a mission assignment to be on station at 6 o'clock. So that means we have to get up at 2, pre-flight, leave at 4, and get to about 150, 200 miles away. And this was the invasion of Cambodia. We got refueled on the way, stopped along where the Mekong River comes out of Cambodia, and started the invasion. There was more helicopters there than I'd ever seen, even in flight school. There was a whole 164th group. There was attack helicopter companies and Chinook helicopter companies, and probably 7 or 8 assault helicopter companies. And we landed in a field, and our lead pilots went and got a briefing. And we always knew that when it was time to crank in a situation like that, we would see his rotating beacon come on, and we could hear him start, and that was a signal for everybody to start. So when that happened, I was full of anticipation. I was scared, and I really wasn't sure what the consequences would be that day. It wasn't D-Day, but for us, it was the same thing. And our mission that day was to fly into Cambodia, go up the Mekong River, and secure the ferry crossing from Saigon to Phnom Penh. So we secured the east side. Well, when Lee turned on his beacon and he pulled that starter and started to crank, we turned ours on, and as it slowly cranked and the rotation of the helicopter blades increased, it felt like the helicopter was coming alive until it got up to flight idle where it was getting close to normal operating RPM, and the rotor wash started to clear out the hot, humid air from the moist delta, and it actually started to cool off a little inside. Vietnamese troops loaded on board. When it was our time to take off, we took out and door gunners were ready to fire, but we encountered, it was cold insertion. We didn't see any enemy that day, and that was a good thing. We came back and stood by and made another trip up there, and that was the end of that. So next week we were supposed to support that invasion, and one day I was flying with a guy from Fort Kent, Maine. His name was Gary Dumont, and we called him Frenchie. And when he signed up for flight school, he thought he was going to get to fly fixed wing, because that's what he wanted to fly up in Maine, float planes and that kind of stuff. And so he wasn't real happy about being a helicopter pilot, and he used to say effing egg beaters. That's all he wasn't real happy flying a helicopter. But this particular day we were offloading some Navy ships where they brought ammo up to support the invasion of Cambodia, and we had a cargo net, and we'd go in and hook it and bring it over to the rearming point and drop it and pick up a spare net and take it out to the Navy ship. And we were bringing these cargo nets full of ammo to the rearming point. Well, on one trip, the engine fire light came on, and they were notorious for being false indications. So I asked the new crew chief we had in the back. The gunner was on the ground guiding us in where we could drop the load. And I says, hey, I got a fire light, just how about check and see if we're all right? And he walked back to the back of the helicopter, and he announced over the intercom, we're on fire. And he came back up between the seats, and he looked at me, and he looked at Frenchie, and he goes, we're on fire, we're on fire. And then he ran back out and he goes, yeah, we're on fire. Well, every time he moved, it made the center of gravity of the helicopter change. And so when he ran forward, we started to do a dive, and when he ran back, we started to do a climb, and I just taught him to sit down. And I entered a real punched off the load, entered a real steep approach with a right turn to land midfield, and got down to the bottom and went to pull pitch to land to the ground, and the engine had quit. I was so busy thinking about the fire emergency procedure that I kind of quit flying the aircraft. I quit looking for other things to go wrong. It was a big lesson that I passed on to many people in the next 30 years. Keep flying the aircraft. Don't concentrate just on the current emergency. Look on. So we landed, and we got out, and we ran away from the aircraft. Frenchie ran a whole lot faster than I did. And when we got far enough away, we stopped and turned around to look, and there was a Huey sitting there with a slow turning rotor blade and black smoke coming up from the engine compartment. And all these guys in the Chinooks there that were carrying, doing heavy loads to the actual point where the invasion was, started to run into the ships. Well, I knew they had big fire extinguishers that was on wheels for those big Chinooks, and I expected them to come out and start doing a firefighting, but that wasn't the case. They came out with movie cameras and 35 millimeter cameras, and they got some real good pictures of our burning Huey. Well, it just was smoking, just a little bit of black smoke, so we thought, well, it's not going to burst into flames, so we went back, and there was an inspection port on the left side, and kind of stood back, and the crew chief took his gloved hand and went to look in there, and the fuel control was leaking, and it was what was burning. And so he got the fire extinguisher, put it out, and yeah, boy, yeah, that was good. We made it. And then we heard this poof, and the engine deck was so hot, it was still leaking fuel that it reignited. Well, we didn't have any more fire extinguishers, so he opened up the cowling, and we went and got sandbags and started throwing sandbags on it. And we eventually got it where it wouldn't burn anymore. One of the Chinooks was generous enough to carry us, hook us up and carry us out and take us back. And some of the guys. So let's see, that was May. We got back to Bearcat, and I was told to get in the Jeep, went to operations, and they had found an aircraft to take me to Vin Long for a special mission, and all I could think about was, gosh, this must be a prisoner snatch or visions of grandeur and doing something great started up here. And I was the only guy on the helicopter going to battalion. Went down there and landed, and he went to refueling pad. He landed on the colonel's pad. And I went inside, and what's going on? He gave me a set of orders, and he says, here, take these. You're a body escort and go to Saigon. And my good friend George Mason had died. George had died in a Chinook while resupplying. He resupplied Firebase Ripcord and Firebase O'Reilly. He was shot down at O'Reilly. And so I came back to San Francisco. I learned how to be a body escort while they prepared George. Put him on a commercial flight in the baggage area, and I was up top. We went to Oklahoma, saw his mom and dad. I rode in the hearse to the funeral home. 3 or 4 days were blank, but we had a funeral service at his high school that he graduated from 2.5 years prior. And I went to the cemetery and I presented Miss Mason with a flag. I had rehearsed the little speech about his service and what the flag meant and everything, but it was hard to get out. I choked up, cried, she cried, and we buried George. And we went by their farm. They called it a ranch. And the major from Fort Sill told me, the Masons have requested you for 2 weeks to take care of some personal business. All I want to do is get back to my unit. All I want to do is get back to the guys. I want to get back to Vietnam with my unit. And so I asked Mr. Mason there at the reception, I says, I'd kind of like get started on this. What is it you need me to do? And he reached inside the jacket that he'd worn to the funeral and gave me an envelope, a business envelope. He says, I need you to take care of this. And I opened it up, and it was a round-trip ticket. They had bought a round-trip ticket from Oklahoma City to Augusta, Georgia. He said, you go home, see your mom and dad. I had no thoughts about doing that. And what a wonderful gift in their time of grief. Another good story. So I did that. I went back to Vietnam. When I got there, there was a guy walking around with a hat on that had Enid, Oklahoma on it. And I told him I just came from there. And I told him about George Mason, and he wrote his mom. And come to find out, Mrs. Crumry was there at George's funeral. She had seen me, but I don't know whether I met her or not, but she helped console Mrs. Mason during that process. July comes around, and I've quit flying for my last 30 days, and I'm the scheduling officer. Crumry has been there long enough to be an aircraft commander, and I assigned him his first mission as an aircraft commander, and by 12 o'clock that day, he's dead. I was 20 years old. Come back to the States for a year, work with the Vietnamese VNAF students in Hunter, go to Cobra school, go back to Vietnam as a Cobra attack pilot, and we reconned the Ashaw Valley primarily for 6 months. 100 first stood down, and we all came home when I got out of the Army. So that's it. You got anybody? We're going to ask for some questions now. If you can turn the lights up, is that time to do that? Couple of questions. I don't know what time it is. We got about 10 minutes. So who has where's the microphone? Who has a question? Raise your hand, please.
So when you said
Just wait for the microphone.
You said when you went down that last time, the Chinook took you out, it pulled out the whole helicopter.
Yeah, when you leave out here, there's a couple of guys standing by some ammo crates with a cargo net and everything,
Right.
and they're hooking up to a Chinook.
Okay.
There was actually a crew that came out and would rig the helicopter, tie the blades down so they wouldn't float, put a little drag chute on it, pick it up and fly it back.
Okay.
I had a picture there earlier of a B model that they brought back, and they dropped from about 10 foot and it just broke in half.
Okay, but the only reason they did that is it looked like the helicopter was savable and everything, like if it.
Oh yeah, it needed a new engine deck and stuff like that, and there was a depot maintenance there, and if it wasn't good enough, they'd send it back to the States, and we'd draw another helicopter, and we'd turn one in, get one, and they'd fix it and send it back to Vietnam, and later on somebody else got that after it was repaired.
Okay.
Please.
In your mission descriptions, you said a lot about maximum hours of flying, 10, 20 hours a day. What kind of downtime or rest time or recuperation time did you receive, if any at all, between your missions so you could get physically and mentally straight for your next combat assignment?
Our missions were generated by the report that maintenance sent in the evening before. And if they said they expected to have 10 helicopters, 10 slicks, or 18 slicks and a couple of guns, they sent that down to battalion, and when battalion received mission request, they would look at how many aircraft you had, and if they needed a combat assault and you had 10 aircraft, they would tell you we need 10 aircraft for a combat assault, a couple of guns to cover them, and a Charlie, and above that it was single out to single ship missions. But as far as the pilots and the number of hours we had a 30-day running total, and we would assign pilots the next day by who had the lowest amount of hours in the past 30 days. And when we divided that up, the lowest amount of hours usually went to the single ship missions that usually were about 10 hours a day, and the higher time pilots were assigned to the combat assaults because sometimes they were only 5 or 6 hours a day. We had a 90-hour and a 30-day period in which we were supposed to go see the flight surgeon and be checked out to see if we were okay, and we had a 120-hour 30-day limit. There was a brick wall and you weren't supposed to fly anywhere past that. Well, I'm here to tell you the brick wall was torn apart with the needs of the infantry guys when they needed us. My high time for a 30-day was 175 hours in 30 days. In today's Army, guys that fly slicks, they're required to get 80 hours a year. I got 175 hours in a month. When I came home from Vietnam, I had 1,155 combat hours, and that relates to today in a peacetime Army, 15 years of experience. I was 20 years old and had the equivalent of 15 years of flying service.
Did you say you flew gunships?
Yes, second tour I flew Cobras with the 101st.
Yeah.
I got to go for a ride in a B model gunship, one of the Falcons, because at the end of the tour, you know, everybody wanted to say, well, you know, I was able to fly at least one day, and usually the gun pilots wanted to fly on one of those swing ship singles missions where you got some good food to eat in the middle of the day. They usually had sea rations every
Did you
day.
have a shoot 'em up mission?
Yeah, we did.
You-
Yes, sir.
Did you have a favorite helicopter that you like to fly, that you know, like to fly?
That's a,
Favorite one?
that's a good question. Did I have a favorite helicopter? I was assigned to a helicopter and had my name when I became an aircraft commander. It had my name on it. But I didn't fly it all the time. The crew chief and the gunner flew that aircraft and were responsible for the maintenance and the guns on the aircraft every time it flew. It didn't matter if it flew 10 hours one day and 20 hours the next day. They flew that aircraft. The pilots, based on their 30-day running total, flew different aircraft depending on what mission the aircraft. And we always didn't fly our platoon aircraft. Sometimes we flew the other platoon's aircraft. But like I say, the pilots were assigned by the amount of time they had, and the crew chief and door gunner stayed with their aircraft continuously.
Thank
But
you.
when it came time to wash it, I was expected to come out there and wash my aircraft. Please, another question.
Got another one here.
When you did your second tour, what were the dates of your second tour?
The second tour, I went back to with the 101st. I started in the middle of August 1971, and I came home January the 16th of 72 when the 101st stood down. I have a picture in there of a scabbard pad, the B Troop pad, with all the revetments in the hangars, and there's not one helicopter in sight. They'd all been shipped out to other units or back to the States, and we were still there.
Now, did you fly in support of Lam Summit?
No, I left in January of 72, and I didn't get there until August of 71, 72, so I think 719 was in spring of 71, then maybe 720 was in the spring of 72. I wasn't there for either one, and I'm kind of glad I weren't. It was really a pretty rough time. I understand they're supposed to be making a movie about that
Yeah, it
pretty
was a
soon.
mess. Now, when George Mason died, you remember what date that was?
What day it was?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was May the 5th, 1970.
Okay, so
At-
he was flying in support of Driftcord and
Well, he
at O'Reilly.
was shot down at O'Reilly.
Yeah, O'Reilly was an urban base just north of Driftcord.
And Ready Reaction Force was the 2nd and 17th, and then the 187th guys secured the site, the Rocket Sons, who General Westmoreland was with in Japan, and my brother Bruce used to go watch the 187th jump, and that's what inspired him to jump out of good airplanes with the 82nd.
Oh, which did you like flying better, the Huey or the Cobra?
I really preferred the Huey to the Cobra and the Apache. We had a crew chief and a gunner in the back, door guns. I sat in an armor-plated seat. We had, instead of 2 eyes that you'd have in the Cobra or the Apache, you had 4 eyes. You had guys that could see people shooting at you by the flash or hear them, and they were able to cover all the way back to the tail. And I tell you, in Apache, it was so well built, 2 engines, 2 nose gear boxes back there, that sitting in the back, there was still so much noise that came into it that the only way I'd have known if I'd have flown in combat, which I didn't, the only way to know that you were being fired at was if you could feel it being hit.
Okay.
But I loved the Huey because it was like, you know, instead of a brand new Corvette, it was like driving your 55 Chevy convertible. No computers, and it was just a joy, and we had crew, and there was a lot of camaraderie there between the crews and the pilots. Anybody else?
Could you explain how you would get out of the helicopter? Because didn't your crew chief have to get out and slide something? What was the door for you to get out?
Sure. How do we get out of the helicopter in an emergency situation? We really practiced this. We had an armor-plated seat and a door, but there was a armor plate that slid forward to about this size, and it was up here. And believe me, you just couldn't get small enough to hide behind the whole thing. But we practiced going out the middle.
Okay.
All our doors were always open, and it was a matter of whoever wasn't flying to unstrap, go out through the middle and go out the far door, and the guy in that seat would go out the middle and go out the side door, and we'd just about beat the crew chief and the gunner out. If you could get out. Some guys, like Crumry, the day he crashed, they had a tail rotor strike going into a pickup zone, and they crashed. A rotor blade came through the cockpit, and his best friend, Joe Galinsky, whose children live in Greenville, and Joe's been dead for a while. His classmate, Joe Galinsky, sat there and held Crumry as he blabbered for about 20 minutes. And the blade, sometimes in a crash sequence, the blade comes through the cockpit. And they didn't get out because they had tail rotor strike and it rolled over immediately.
Thank you.
I was asked before about how did I feel about surviving Vietnam. There's a lot of guys that had survivor's guilt, and somebody that was killed, their friend was a better soldier or a better person than they were, and it should have been them and not them, but me. And I dealt with that for a long time. And I was coming home from work one afternoon, about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and the thought passes very quickly. But it was basically, it was like an epiphany. I'm not a strongly religious person, but it came to me that I survived Vietnam, 2 tours of Vietnam, not because I thought I was the greatest pilot in the world and I was the luckiest or I had the best crew, but I survived because it was God's will. It didn't matter what I did. If it was Goldsmith's time to go and he was called, he went. There wouldn't have been anything I could have done if it was his time to go. And for some reason, I survived. God had a plan for me. I don't know what it was. I met my beautiful wife, Kay, 50 years ago. And we had, maybe it was our children we had, or maybe the grandchildren. But I still have something to do, and maybe it's to be here to share this with you. But God controls when he calls you. You don't have to be an old guy. You don't have to be in Vietnam. You can go anytime. So I'm glad to be here. Jim.
Just like I say, appreciate your service, what you've done, and your commitment to your fellow aviators and crewmen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. Jim and I flew in the National Guard together for a while. Al Jeffords is here, we flew together. Lim Grant is here. Charlie Evans is here. And I appreciate not just them, but everybody else that's come out to see this. And I thank South Carolina Museum, Confederate Relic Room. I'm an old guy, but I'm not a relic yet. For this opportunity.
I wonder what it had to do.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Give you a chance to use any of those.
Before y'all leave, if you haven't been here before, would you please sign the sheet we've got over by the door and leave your email address if you can. And one thing we're gonna do is we're going to email everybody who wants to see this on C-SPAN, because we don't know when it's gonna be. We'll let you know. Thank you.
All right, thank you.